Dave, can you give us your thoughts on your whether you have any expectations that the game in Vancouver might be postponed? Have you been following what's going on over there and everything?
Yeah, I mean, just as probably hear as much as you do, really. We're anticipating it's on, until we hear different. Our travel plans and our practice schedule and everything has been set up that we're going. So I haven't heard any different, but I guess we'll just have to monitor it day to day. But right now, we're scheduled to go there tomorrow afternoon still.
And if you do go there, um, would what are your thoughts on having to play Friday in Vancouver, fly right over Alberta, and I don't know, get into Winnipeg at 4 in the morning or whatever it is, and
Yeah,
then play the team you're going against for second place on Saturday night?
it is what it is. The schedule is, we know it's had some quirks this year because of the situation, and you just have to deal with the hand that you're dealt, and that's the hand we've been dealt here. So it's not an ideal situation, but there's no excuses. You got to do what you got to do. We've got an early game on Friday night, and so we get in there a little bit earlier than anticipated, and then the game in Winnipeg on Saturday night's not till 9 o'clock. So we'll have some time in between, but it's you just have to deal with it and focus on what you have to do to win, and we'll be there to play.
Derek Van Dies, Post Media.
Hey Dave, I was wondering if you could give us an update on Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and whether or not he'll be ready to play this weekend.
He's still up in the air a little bit. He skated again this morning on his own, and a little longer today. So I'll see what TD says, whether he joins our group tomorrow or not. He's waiting for some clearance from the doctors. So, but he skated for almost 45 minutes, I think, this morning. So we'll see where he gets tomorrow.
And I also want to ask you about, obviously it's been a strange year, and I want to ask you about players are creatures of habit, and they get into a rhythm of practicing, playing, practicing, playing. And when you have a few days without a game, how does that kind of affect that rhythm?
Well, from a coach's standpoint, you try to make sure you're trying to spin it the right way. Like we needed some rest, just mentally and physically, a couple days rest, and then this really, the trade deadline on Monday, and you got your team in order. We got 14 games left. We've used these, the last couple days to really dig into some of the stuff that we need to make sure we're have in place for the stretch drive. So the practice days have been good. A little bit of rest has been good. But that being said, you got to deal with what's in front of you. And we play 4 games in 6 days, and then we've got a few more days off again. So you try to maximize what you're doing, whether it's game day or practice day. Players, I think, like to get in a rhythm where there's not too many days off in between games. They'd like to, like you say, they're creatures of habit, but their habit is they would much rather play games than practice. So, there's that happy balance there. But you try to maximize what you're doing, whether it's a practice day or make sure you have energy for the games. And
Daniel Bowman, The Athletic.
Hi, Dave. You kind of touched on this in your previous answer, but I'm just curious how can you say how much more challenging this year has been from a coaching perspective? With the constant schedule changes and obviously dealing with things off the ice. How have you and your coaching staff been able to kind of fare during this season?
I don't know if it's more challenging. It's different, and there's been some positive, like some of playing the team 2 and sometimes 3 times in a row has been interesting. They're like little playoff series, and it's when if you win the first game, it's harder to win the second game. So there's some things like that from a coaching standpoint that has been different, but it's been kind of intriguing. It's been kind of interesting to be involved in. Now that being said, some of the quirks in the schedule where you're playing a lot of games in a short amount of time, and then you have a few days off, and the changes in the schedule are something that doesn't normally happen. So you're dealing with changes. It's from a coaching staff, it's probably not that bad. You're kind of trying to pound home the same things every day, but the people that I feel for are the travel people that are they're scrambling every day as things change. So it's been different. I wouldn't say more challenging, but different.
So you mentioned those like 2 and 3 game series. As a coach, how do you approach that? Do you approach them like a playoff series? And is
Yeah.
there a lot of like tinkering that you have to do to kind of, with lineups and matchups and those types of things?
Yeah, there's you have an idea what you're going to see going into the first game, and there might be some things happen in that first game that you feel like you want to tweak a little bit, or even when you win, like it's easier. Everybody thinks you tweak when you lose, but even when you win, you try to tweak a couple things to see if you can stay ahead of it. And those are things for coaches that are interesting. You try to dig into the game, and you're trying to always get an advantage somehow, or you're trying to make sure you're taking away the other team's advantage. So there's things like that when you play the same team back to back that come into play, as opposed to a normal schedule where you just you might be, for instance, down in California, you got LA one time, Anaheim, and then you're into San Jose. It's all different scenarios every game. So it's playing the same team over is a little more of a playoff feel, and it's there's some intrigue that goes into the game-to-game tactical stuff that comes into play.
Rob Chachkowski, Post Media.
Hi, Dave. Oilers have done a very good job so far of staying COVID safe, but the COVID fatigue affects everybody. Are you still seeing in the room that they're talking about it and they're self-policing, and it's something that is a daily focus point?
No, it is a daily focus point. Our group has been very vigilant, and I give Dr. Naidu and TD a ton of credit. They're at the forefront of that and making sure that the protocols are in place and they're being met. And our guys are they just like you say, they talk about it. They want to keep it out. And it's all the players talk. You've got the players in the U.S. now. A lot of them are vaccinated, and things are a little more open there. But our focus as a team has been really strong, and they're committed to it. We've got a job to do this season, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can with hockey and the protocols to keep everybody safe.
You're in pretty much the same situation you were in last year at this point. Heading down the stretch drive, fighting for second place, and the season got shut down by COVID. Does part of you how confident are you that this thing is going to reach its finish line, or do you worry a little bit that one too many wrenches are going to get thrown into this?
No, I have no doubt that it's going to finish. We're close enough to the finish line now. I think there's been some challenges during the year for the league to reschedule some things, but for the most part, it's pushed ahead. So, barring anything drastic happen, I think this thing will push through.
Mark Spector, Sportsnet.
Dave, I want to ask about your right wingers. You've mixed your lines around. This isn't me second guessing you. Obviously, you got a good record. You know what you're doing. You've mixed your centermen back and forth. Sometimes you put McDavid and Draisaitl together. Sometimes not. You've moved left wingers in and out. But your two right guys up top, Puljujarvi's pretty much stayed with McDavid most part. Yamamoto's pretty much stayed in the next line for the most part. Is there a reason that those guys have stayed while everyone else has moved? Is there a project going on here, or what do you think?
No, you're just looking for different, people that complement each other, and you got to have, as much as we're moving some pieces around, you've got to have some consistency in some places, So Yamamoto has been a good player with Draisaitl a lot of the time. When Draisaitl plays, when we got the Connor McDavid and Draisaitl split up, Puljujarvi's come in, done a nice job with Connor. He he's a hard forechecking guy. He creates a lot of loose pucks. So it's we'll continue to tinker, and there's sometimes you're looking at certain matchups within a game or ability to get an advantage or needing more balance. So there's different factors come into moving people around. We're still trying to find some fits for some guys here to get them at a steady, where they feel like that they're stable and can really do their job. But for the most part, you've got to have some players that you're putting in place where you're not tinkering around with. As much as coaches like to tinker, there's at some point you got to get a little bit of consistency in there.
Do you, in Puljujarvi specifically, it's been a year where we didn't know where he'd be at the start, and everyone's real happy with the player he's turning into, and there's a good player here. But as a top line right wing, his numbers aren't very good. He's not, he's playing well, but he's not producing numbers.
Yeah,
when do we switch flip the switch from prospect to production?
Well, you hope that comes. We track a lot of the scoring chances and stuff like that. He's still productive in those regards. So hopefully that turns into results here at some point. But you're right. I mean, pure production wise, it's probably not what you'd like to see, but he's growing into that. So we'll continue to push him along.
Jack Michael, 6:30 Ched.
Dave, you've said all year all teams have kind of dealt with the residual effects of COVID to some extent. But the Oilers have had a few unique situations, and maybe it's cost them a game or two here, down the line during the regular season. In your experience, not necessarily with this, but some of the emotional ups and downs, might it pay off down the line when you need it in a playoff series coming through kind of this sort of adversity?
I think there's difference between regular season and playoffs. You're talking about a couple of games where we have just been, it looked like we were emotionally drained in 2 games. You're talking about the Montreal game and you're talking about the Calgary game, which is, as a coach, you're around your team every day. You see when they look tired or when they look emotionally drained, and both those days. I know the Calgary game, that was a hard day. I mean, it's you're dealing with basically a funeral for a teammate that was close to everybody here, and then trying to get the emotion to go play. I understand where the players are coming from there. The Montreal game was just one. I could told you when we got on the plane in Toronto, when we were going back to Montreal, the players looking like, what are we doing? So there's just times when it's hard. Now, that being said, that's the regular season, and you try to muster that up. In playoffs, there's no excuses. You got to turn. If you're going to give up a playoff game because you're not feeling good, you're not going to win that series. So it's different between regular season and playoffs. I understand the regular season, there's going to be some ups and downs in it, but playoffs, if there's downs, you're going down in a hurry.
So you don't necessarily think there's value in coming through some of the experiences you've had in terms of that somehow paying off in the playoffs?
Those 2 experiences, those are games you throw out the window.
Gotcha.
I'd rather learn from games. We might lose a game, but there's things in it that we can do better. There's certain games when if your team's not at full capacity, there's not much you get out of those.
Thanks.
Jason Gregor, TSN 1260.
Dave, I know you're not going to see Kulakoff until next week, and he'll miss the 4 games. What you know what you get from him, right? He's been really solid in New Jersey on the left side, taking on tough minutes. Do you have in your mind an idea of who you'd like to play there, or do you need to see him with a few different guys?
Yeah, we'll bring him in and see where things fit. It'll probably, you get into some practices, we'll try him a couple different places until we get him in some games and just see where it goes. You'll get a feel for where he fits best. And there's the other, like where he fits best, where the rhythm in our lineup goes. There's certain matchups, things that you're looking for, special teams. So you gotta get him in and get him in a few games and get a feel for what he's doing.
And this weekend, very unique back-to-back because you're in Vancouver and then you're in Winnipeg the next night. That's pretty far travel.
Yeah.
Do you keep that in the back of your mind when it comes to ice time on Friday night for some of your players?
Depends how the game goes. You're going into Vancouver to win. You're going to do whatever you can to win that game, and you'll worry about the next game after that.
And because of Vancouver's situation, Dave, I'm sure you've seen it. Like they don't have a lot of healthy players at this juncture. How that whole situation with spreading right through their team, any concern at all the health of your guys going in there against them?
No, I don't think the NHL would send us in there if there was a concern. So we're more concerned about making sure our team's in order. We played a Montreal team that had been sitting out a week and come out and spanked us, so we better be ready to play.